Welcome to episode 9 of the podcast Monday Morning Detective. My name is Gino Scala and I'll be your host. Today we're going to talk about an incident that happened in Baker, Florida. And it happened some time ago, but these incidences are happening more and more often. And it's the situation where a 17-year-old girl was coming home from, she went from high school to her job as a waitress. So she was coming home from her waitress job late in the evening, 10 o'clock at night. And her family, her father owns several businesses, a restaurant and several other businesses, and it does fairly well. But the rumor around her high school anyway is that she's rich. And it turns out, he's far from rich, but they do okay. They have they have a nice home with some nice property in Baker, Florida. I'm not familiar with the town. Their home looks to be very, farm-like and out and away from any major city. So it's kind of it's a long road that leads to their house. And as she returns home, and there are no lights outside, no street lights, it's basically a dirt road. She notices that they have a driveway with just a chain link fence. I mean, it's not that fancy. A chain link fence, a double fence for the driveway, unpaved driveway, and she arrives home and finds 4 garbage cans, the big city plastic garbage totes, were spread across the front of her driveway gate. Now that was obviously unusual. No one would put them there. So she took her cell phone and called the house. As she remained in the car running, and her father came out, moved the garbage cans back to their regular position to the side of the driveway, and opened the gate for her and let her in. So they talked about it, thought that was odd, someone playing a trick, didn't think much of it. But the girl said later that on the whole ride home, she had a funny feeling. She felt uneasy, she felt unsafe. And you can call this women's intuition or something subconscious that she saw. Maybe she realized someone was following her and didn't really, take it seriously, or at the last minute the car behind her disappeared, so she didn't give it too much thought. But she thought enough of it to mention it that, she was nervous. And getting home and seeing the garbage cans there didn't make her feel any better. So if it was a prank, they weren't laughing. Well, later that evening, not too long after she returned home, their dog inside the house was barking nonstop, which was highly unusual given the fact that they live quite a bit away from, the rest of the people on some big property. And the father awakened to quiet the dog. He also brought with him his handgun in case it was a coyote or some wild animal. I don't know what runs around down there in Baker. That's certainly not a bear, but a wolf or a coyote or just a wild dog. And he steps outside and turns to his right and he sees two men trying to break into the garage door, which was uh, another entrance into the residence. Not the lifting up garage door, but a single door, kind of like a workshop door. And they were pushing and breaking the frame, pushing on the door and breaking the frame, trying to gain entry. So the father, uh, Terry Brackney, shot 3 times, missing the suspects. Not even clear if he shot at them or up in the air, but he said he shot 3 times, and they took off. They got in a white van, and the van departed. When he contacted the police, he gave them a description of the 2 men that he saw, and it was clear from the damage on the door that a burglary was, attempted. And they have the stand your ground law in Florida, and of course he was protecting his family. And he reported the garbage cans being placed in front of the fence, the driveway fence. At this time, the police advised him. They put out a bolo, be on the lookout for this white van. I'm not sure if the license tag was given out or anything of the sort, but also a brief description of the 2 men that were seen in the dark about 10 yards away. The police informed him that there is this trick going around where kids will put garbage cans in front of a parking space or an entry for the purpose, or in the middle of the street for that matter, and we've seen that happen in the recent past. But this is a similar situation where the garbage cans were placed in front of the driveway, tempting her, Amber, who's 17, to get out of the car and move them. However, because of the funny feeling and the unsafe feeling that she had earlier, she was not going to get out in the dark. And the police feel that by her not getting out of the car, that kind of saved her. Now, later, that vehicle was found by the police and pulled over. And inside the vehicle were 4 black males, 17 and 18, all students at the same high school that Amber goes to. They had guns, and they had knives, they had zip ties, they had duct tape, they had masks, they had gloves, and they had tools, burglary tools. And they had concocted, apparently a couple of them talked, a plan to kidnap the teenage daughter. And they were going to force her into the residence and then break into the house with her to subdue the family and rob the home. This is what they admitted to having planned. Using a gun and a knife, chances are, we don't know, obviously, thank God, but there is a very real possibility they would have left no witnesses alive. As it turns out, he didn't have much in the way of cash on hand or anything of that nature. They didn't have jewelry or any artwork or anything to speak of. So it would have been a disaster had they completed such a kidnapping, which, again, in most situations, more often than not, these situations turn into murders because the suspects know they're kidnapping with weapons, and that in some states can be alone a life sentence. So there's probably nothing to be lost by killing the witnesses. So it was very intriguing story, very fortunate story. Oh, here's somewhat of a kind of a twist on this. One of the businesses, and the first business that the Brackneys owned that made them the money to buy other businesses, was he runs a funeral parlor, a funeral home. And his statement was that the day of the pretrial, where the suspects provide their plea to the judge, he said that probably would have been the day of their funeral had they completed this act, because it was a couple of days after the fact. So just a very, and these incidences occur all the time, where people put obstacles in parking places in order to get the driver out of the vehicle. Now, generally they carjack the vehicle because people will tend to leave the car running with the keys in it as they move the object, or they actually kidnap or kill the person that's driving, which was the case that took place, I believe it was in California, where the driver got out. He had a infant in a child seat in the car watching as he was assassinated on the street. And based on the past relationship with his ex-wife and the things that are going on there, I believe very strongly that she's somehow involved. Probably a hired hit, and if it's a hired hit, it's going to be a little longer to find the person. They could have come from out of state or out of the country, but eventually, and I haven't looked up, I don't know if they found anybody yet, but eventually that person is going to come to justice. I guarantee it. And I believe strongly that the girlfriend or the ex-wife with whom he just picked up the child from is behind that shooting as well. So just something to keep in mind if you have teenagers, young girls, or if you are a woman, if you see something like this at your residence, drive off, stay in the car, and call. If there's no one to call the police. If there's no one at the house to call the police or a neighbor and have them help you. The perpetrator, in this case there were 4, but in normal cases it's going to be 1 or 2. And they don't really want anybody else involved. They're looking for one person to hurt or to rob or to kidnap. So if you get another person, a neighbor or something, it's probably going to put a wrench in their plans. But again, this is a very common technique, a very common tactic, and you should be aware of it. All right? So that'll conclude episode 9 of the Monday Morning Detective, and have a great weekend. Take care.